The Mediterranean sun cast dancing reflections across the pristine white hull of the yacht Serenity as it cut through the crystal-clear waters off the coast of Monaco. At 72 feet long, the luxury vessel was a masterpiece of engineering and elegance, its sleek lines and polished chrome fixtures drawing admiring glances from other boats in harbor. Standing at the helm was Captain Maria Rodriguez, a woman whose presence commanded respect despite her modest 5'6" frame. Her weathered hands gripped the wheel with the confidence of someone who had spent decades navigating the world's oceans. What most people aboard didn't know was that beneath her crisp, white captain's uniform lay a history that few could imagine. The yacht belonged to tech billionaire James Whitmore, who had chartered it for a week-long Mediterranean cruise with his family and business associates. Whitmore had specifically requested a female captain, believing it would be a novelty for his guests. He had no idea he was getting one of the most decorated naval officers in recent history. Maria had been running luxury yacht charters for 3 years now, ever since her retirement from active duty. The transition from commanding destroyers and aircraft carriers to piloting pleasure craft had been jarring at first, but the pay was excellent, and it allowed her to remain on the water she loved so much. Captain Rodriguez called out Sarah Whitmore, the billionaire's daughter, as she approached the bridge. "My father wants to know if we can take a detour to see the French Riviera from a different angle." Maria glanced at her charts and nodded. "Of course, Miss Whitmore. We have plenty of time before our dinner reservation in Cannes." As she adjusted their course, Maria's trained eye caught something on the horizon that made her pause. A gray silhouette was moving toward them at considerable speed. Her years of experience told her this wasn't another pleasure craft or commercial vessel. The distinctive lines and radar array were unmistakable. It was a naval patrol boat. "Interesting," she murmured, reaching for her binoculars. Through the lenses, she could see the French naval ensign flying from the vessel's stern. It was a Flamand-class patrol boat, probably conducting routine security sweeps in the area. The boat's approach seemed casual at first, but Maria noticed it was gradually changing course to intercept them. This wasn't unusual in these waters, where naval vessels frequently conducted random inspections of civilian craft, especially expensive yachts that might be involved in smuggling or other illegal activities. James Whitmore emerged from the main salon, his face flushed from the afternoon's champagne consumption. "Captain, what's that military boat doing? Are we in some kind of restricted area?" "No, sir. We're in international waters," Maria replied calmly. "They're likely conducting a routine inspection. It happens frequently in this region." Whitmore's business associates had gathered on deck now, their expensive suits and designer dresses looking somewhat out of place as they watched the approaching patrol boat with nervous expressions. Among them was Rebecca Chun, a prominent Chinese-American investor, and Dr. Andreas Mueller, a German pharmaceutical executive. Both had been discussing sensitive business deals during the voyage, and the thought of naval scrutiny made them visibly uncomfortable. The patrol boat was now close enough that Maria could see the crew members moving about on deck. They wore the standard blue uniforms of the French Navy, and she could make out at least 6 personnel. The vessel's loudspeaker crackled to life, broadcasting in accented English. "Luxury Yacht Serenity. This is French naval vessel Requin. Prepare to be boarded for routine inspection. Reduce speed and maintain course." Maria immediately complied, pulling back on the throttles until the yacht settled into a gentle cruise. She had been through countless inspections during her charter career, and the process was usually straightforward. Present the proper documentation, allow the officers to conduct a brief search, answer a few questions, and everyone would be on their way. "This is outrageous," Whitmore huffed. "Do you know how much money I've spent on this trip? Can't they see this is obviously a legitimate charter operation?" "Sir, it's standard procedure," Maria explained patiently. "The inspection will take maybe 30 minutes, and then we'll be free to continue our journey." But as the patrol boat drew alongside, Maria noticed something that gave her pause. The young officer standing at the bow was making hand signals that seemed unnecessarily aggressive for a routine boarding. His body language suggested this might be more than a standard inspection. Lieutenant Commander Jean-Luc Dubois had been having a frustrating day. His patrol had encountered 3 vessels so far, all of which had been clean, and his superior officer had been pressing him to show results. The appearance of an expensive yacht filled with obviously wealthy passengers seemed like the perfect opportunity to demonstrate his thoroughness. Dubois was 32 years old and ambitious, having graduated near the top of his class from the French Naval Academy. He had been assigned to patrol duties in the Mediterranean for the past 2 years, a position he considered beneath his capabilities. Every inspection was an opportunity to prove he deserved a more prestigious posting. As his crew secured their boat alongside the yacht, Dubois studied the passengers lined up on deck. The men wore expensive watches and tailored clothing, while the women displayed jewelry that probably cost more than his annual salary. These were exactly the type of people who thought their wealth made them above the law. Permission to come aboard, Dubois called out in heavily accented English as he stepped onto the yacht's polished deck. Maria stepped forward, her captain's uniform crisp and professional. Permission granted, Lieutenant Commander. I'm Captain Rodriguez, master of this vessel. How can we assist you today? Dubois barely glanced at her, his attention focused on the well-dressed passengers. In his experience, yacht captains were usually hired help, glorified taxi drivers for the wealthy. He dismissed her with a brief nod before turning to address Whitmore. I'm Lieutenant Commander Dubois of the French Navy. This vessel is being inspected under international maritime law. I will need to see all documentation, passenger manifests, and cargo declarations. Maria retrieved a leather portfolio from the bridge and handed it to Dubois. Everything is in order, Commander. Charter license, safety certificates, crew credentials, and passenger list. Dubois flipped through the documents with theatrical thoroughness, clearly enjoying the discomfort of the wealthy passengers. The paperwork was indeed in perfect order, but that didn't mean he couldn't make this a more extensive inspection than usual. These documents appear satisfactory, he said finally, but I will need to conduct a complete search of the vessel. Smuggling is a serious concern in these waters. Rebecca Chun stepped forward, her voice tight with controlled anger. Commander, surely you can see this is a legitimate pleasure cruise. We're business people on vacation, not criminals. Dubois smiled coldly. Madam, you would be surprised how often criminals disguise themselves as legitimate business people. My duty is to ensure the security of French territorial waters. What none of them knew was that Maria had been watching this exchange with growing interest. She had encountered Lieutenant Commander Dubois's type before. Young, ambitious officers who used their authority to intimidate civilians. During her military career, she had dealt with such officers firmly, but diplomatically. As Dubois began directing his crew to search the yacht's interior, Maria made a decision. She would allow the inspection to proceed normally, but she was prepared to intervene if the young commander's behavior became too aggressive. Her passengers might be wealthy and demanding, but they were under her protection while aboard her vessel. The search began in the main salon, where Dubois's crew methodically examined every cabinet, drawer, and storage space. The passengers were asked to remain on deck while the inspection proceeded, a standard procedure that nonetheless felt humiliating to people accustomed to deference and luxury service. Dr. Mueller approached Maria quietly. Captain, is this normal? The officer seems rather thorough. Maria nodded reassuringly. It's within their rights, Doctor. Some officers are more meticulous than others. We have nothing to hide, so there shouldn't be any problems. But as the inspection continued, it became clear that Dubois was indeed being more thorough than necessary. His crew was taking apart equipment that obviously couldn't conceal contraband, and the lieutenant commander himself was asking increasingly pointed questions about the passengers' business activities. Mr. Whitmore, Dubois said, consulting his notes, your manifest lists you as the primary charterer. What is the nature of your business activities in Europe? Whitmore's face reddened. I'm a CEO of Whitmore Technologies. We develop software solutions for Fortune 500 companies. This is a pleasure cruise, not a business trip. Yet you travel with several business associates, Du Bois observed. Dr. Mueller works in pharmaceuticals, a field known for its complex international regulations. Dr. Mueller stepped forward, his German accent becoming more pronounced as his anger rose. Commander, I am here as James's personal friend. My professional activities are completely legitimate and have nothing to do with this vacation. The tension on deck was becoming palpable. Maria could see that Du Bois was enjoying the power dynamic, using his authority to make wealthy civilians uncomfortable. It was unprofessional behavior, but technically within his rights as a boarding officer. The search of the guest cabins revealed nothing more suspicious than expensive clothing and jewelry. The crew quarters were similarly clean, containing only the personal effects of Maria and her two crew members. First Mate David Kumar, a former British Royal Navy petty officer, and Chef Isabella Santos, who had trained at the Cordon Bleu before transitioning to yacht service. As the inspection moved to the engine room and storage areas, Maria noticed that Du Bois was becoming increasingly frustrated. His theatrical thoroughness wasn't revealing any contraband, and his crew was beginning to look embarrassed by their commander's obvious harassment of the passengers. Captain Rodriguez, Du Bois said, turning his attention to her for the first time since boarding. I notice your documentation lists you as master of this vessel, but you appear quite young for such responsibility. How long have you been operating luxury yachts? Maria maintained her professional demeanor. I've been in maritime service for over 20 years, Commander. I transitioned to charter operations 3 years ago after retiring from previous employment. Du Bois raised an eyebrow. Previous employment? What type of maritime work were you doing before luxury charters? It was at this moment that Maria realized the young commander was about to receive an education he hadn't bargained for. She reached into her portfolio and withdrew a small leather wallet, placing it in Du Bois's hands. Perhaps this will clarify my background, Lieutenant Commander. Du Bois opened the wallet casually, expecting to see a standard merchant marine license or yacht master certification. Instead, his eyes widened as he stared at a military identification card that made his hands tremble slightly. The card bore the seal of the United States Navy and identified Captain Maria Elena Rodriguez as a commissioned officer with over 2 decades of active service. But it was the small notation in the corner that made Du Bois's face go pale. The woman standing before him, whom he had dismissed as hired help, was not just any retired naval officer. She was a former aircraft carrier commanding officer, one of the most elite positions in the entire United States military. The small notation indicated she had commanded the USS Enterprise during its final deployment before decommissioning. Du Bois stared at the identification card, then looked up at Maria, who was watching him with the calm, steady gaze of someone accustomed to command. In that moment, he realized he had made a serious error in judgment. The inspection that had begun as a routine harassment of wealthy civilians had suddenly become something entirely different. Standing before him was not a glorified taxi driver for the rich, but a woman who had commanded a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier with a crew of over 5,000 personnel. She had been responsible for billions of dollars in military equipment and had operated in some of the world's most dangerous waters. The implications of his behavior toward her began to sink in as Du Bois realized that Captain Rodriguez outranked him significantly, even in retirement. More importantly, she had remained silent about her background, allowing him to dig himself into an increasingly deep hole of unprofessional conduct. The other passengers had noticed the change in Du Bois's demeanor, but couldn't see what had caused it. From their perspective, their captain had simply shown the French officer some documentation, but the effect had been dramatic. The arrogant young commander now looked uncertain and uncomfortable. Maria took her identification back and returned it to her portfolio, her movements calm and deliberate. Is there anything else you need to verify regarding my qualifications, Lieutenant Commander? Du Bois struggled to regain his composure, but the damage was done. Every member of his crew had witnessed his disrespectful treatment of a superior officer, and he knew that word of this encounter would spread through naval circles. His ambitions for career advancement had just taken a serious blow. "Captain Rodriguez," he said, his voice now formal and respectful, I apologize if my questions seemed inappropriate. Your documentation is clearly in order." But Maria wasn't finished. Having revealed her background, she intended to use this teachable moment to address the young commander's conduct toward all her passengers, not just herself. The afternoon sun continued to beat down on the yacht's deck as a profound shift in power dynamics began to unfold, setting the stage for a confrontation that would leave lasting impressions on everyone present. The silence on deck stretched for several uncomfortable seconds as Lieutenant Commander Du Bois processed the reality of his situation. His crew members had stopped their search activities and were watching their commander's interaction with a woman they now understood to be a highly decorated naval officer. Maria observed the young officer's internal struggle with the patience of someone who had mentored countless junior personnel during her military career. She recognized the look of an ambitious officer who had overstepped boundaries and was now calculating the potential consequences. "Lieutenant Commander," Maria said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded respect on the bridge of a nuclear aircraft carrier, "perhaps we should discuss the remainder of your inspection procedures." James Whitmore and his guests exchanged puzzled glances. They could sense the dramatic shift in atmosphere, but didn't understand what had caused the French officer's sudden change in demeanor. Rebecca Chun leaned toward Dr. Mueller and whispered, "What just happened? Did you see what she showed him?" Du Bois cleared his throat, attempting to regain some semblance of professional composure. "Captain Rodriguez, my crew has completed their search of the main vessel areas. Everything appears to be in order." "I'm pleased to hear that," Maria replied evenly. "However, I noticed that your inspection methods seemed unusually aggressive for a routine boarding. My passengers are civilians enjoying a leisure cruise, not suspected criminals." The words hit Du Bois like a physical blow. During his Naval Academy training, he had learned about the importance of treating civilian vessels with appropriate respect, especially when no legitimate suspicion of wrongdoing existed. His behavior toward Whitmore's party had been motivated more by personal resentment toward wealthy civilians than by genuine security concerns. "Captain, I assure you that our procedures are standard for vessels in these waters," Du Bois said, though his voice lacked conviction. Maria stepped closer, her expression remaining calm, but her eyes holding the steely look that had once intimidated admirals and defense contractors during budget meetings. "Lieutenant Commander, in my experience commanding naval operations, standard procedure involves treating civilians with courtesy and respect unless specific intelligence suggests otherwise." Was there intelligence suggesting this vessel posed a security threat? Du Bois felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead, despite the Mediterranean breeze. "No, Captain. This was a routine random inspection." "Then perhaps you can explain why you found it necessary to question my passengers about their legitimate business activities and suggest they might be criminals," Maria continued, her tone remaining professional but carrying an unmistakable edge. The French officer's crew members were now openly watching this exchange, and Du Bois could see disapproval in their expressions. Petty Officer Bernard Moreau, his senior enlisted man, had served under several commanding officers and recognized exceptional leadership when he saw it. The American captain's handling of the situation demonstrated the kind of calm authority that earned respect rather than demanding it. Dr. Mueller had moved closer to hear the conversation better, and his understanding of military protocol from his service as a reserve medical officer in the German military helped him appreciate what was unfolding. "My God," he murmured to Whitmore. "I think our captain is dressing down their commanding officer." Maria continued her measured critique. "During my naval career, I observed that young officers sometimes use their authority to compensate for personal insecurities or career frustrations. However, such behavior reflects poorly on the service and can damage international relations when civilian allies are involved." These words struck at the heart of Du Bois's motivations. His assignment to patrol duty had indeed been a source of frustration, and he had been taking out his career disappointments on civilian vessels. The fact that this criticism was coming from someone who had achieved the pinnacle of naval command made it impossible to dismiss. "I understand your concerns," Captain Du Bois said stiffly, "but I was simply being thorough in my duties." Maria nodded thoughtfully. "Thoroughness is indeed a virtue, Lieutenant Commander. During my command of the USS Enterprise, I always emphasized the importance of attention to detail. However, I also taught my officers that true professionalism means accomplishing your mission while maintaining the highest standards of conduct." The mention of the USS Enterprise sent another shock through Du Bois. Even in the French Navy, the commanding officers of American aircraft carriers were legendary figures. These were the people who led massive naval battle groups and made decisions affecting international security. The woman standing before him had held one of the most prestigious commands in the world's most powerful navy. Isabella Santos, the yacht's chef, had emerged from the galley and was watching the interaction with fascination. As a former enlisted sailor herself, she recognized the masterful way Captain Rodriguez was handling the situation, correcting unprofessional behavior while allowing the young officer to maintain some dignity. "Captain Rodriguez," Du Bois said, his voice now noticeably more respectful, "I believe we have completed our inspection. Your vessel and passengers are free to continue their voyage." But Maria wasn't quite finished. The teachable moment was too important to waste, not just for Du Bois, but for his entire crew, who would carry lessons from this encounter throughout their naval careers. "Lieutenant Commander, before you depart, I'd like to share something I learned during my years of command," Maria said, her tone softening slightly. "The greatest measure of a naval officer isn't how effectively he can intimidate civilians, but how well he can accomplish his mission while earning the respect of those he encounters." She gestured toward his crew members, who were listening intently. "Your sailors are watching how you handle this situation. They're learning what kind of officer you are and what kind of Navy you represent. Every interaction with civilians is an opportunity to demonstrate the professionalism and integrity of your service." Du Bois felt his cheeks burning, but he also recognized the wisdom in her words. His crew's expressions told him everything he needed to know about how his behavior had appeared to them. Petty Officer Moreau had served under commanders who earned loyalty through respect rather than fear, and the contrast was obvious. "I appreciate your guidance, Captain," Du Bois said, and for the first time his words seemed genuinely meant rather than merely polite. Maria smiled slightly, the expression transforming her face and revealing the warmth that existed beneath her command presence. "Leadership is something we continue learning throughout our careers, Lieutenant Commander. I made my share of mistakes as a junior officer, and I was fortunate to have senior personnel who took the time to mentor me." James Whitmore approached the group, his earlier anger replaced by curiosity and growing respect for his captain. "Captain Rodriguez, I'm beginning to realize there's quite a bit about your background that you haven't shared with us." "My previous career isn't typically relevant to charter operations, Mr. Whitmore," Maria replied diplomatically. "My focus is on ensuring your safety and enjoyment during our voyage." Dr. Mueller stepped forward, his German military background helping him appreciate the full significance of what had just occurred. "Captain, did I understand correctly that you commanded an aircraft carrier?" Maria nodded simply. "The USS Enterprise was my final seagoing command before I transitioned to shore duty and eventually retirement. The effect of this revelation on the passengers was immediate and dramatic. Rebecca Chun, who had built her fortune in the defense contractor industry, understood exactly what this meant. Aircraft carrier commanding officers were selected from the absolute elite of the Naval Officer Corps. They were responsible for managing complex operations involving thousands of personnel and billions of dollars in equipment. "Good Lord," Whitmore breathed. "We've been treating you like hired help." "You've been treating me exactly as you should treat the captain of a charter yacht," Maria replied firmly. "My previous military service doesn't change my current responsibilities to you as passengers." But the dynamic among the group had shifted permanently. The wealthy business executives who had initially viewed her as skilled but subordinate staff now understood they were in the presence of someone whose leadership experience far exceeded their own, despite their financial success. Lieutenant Commander Du Bois gathered his crew and prepared to return to their patrol boat. As they made ready to depart, he approached Maria one final time. "Captain Rodriguez, I want to apologize for my conduct during this inspection. You were correct about my motivations, and I allowed personal frustrations to affect my professional behavior." Maria extended her hand, and Du Bois shook it gratefully. "We all have challenging days, Lieutenant Commander. What matters is learning from them and becoming better officers." As the French patrol boat pulled away, Du Bois stood at the stern watching the luxury yacht recede into the distance. His crew members were talking quietly among themselves, but he could feel their eyes on him. Petty Officer Moreau approached and stood beside his commanding officer. "Sir, that was quite an education," Moreau said carefully. Du Bois nodded slowly. "Yes, it was. I think I learned more about leadership in the past 30 minutes than I did in my entire academy training." Meanwhile, aboard the yacht, the passengers were processing their own revelations about their captain. Sarah Whitmore approached Maria at the helm, where she had resumed their course toward Cannes. "Captain Rodriguez, I have to ask, why did you leave the Navy to run charter boats? It seems like such a dramatic change." Maria considered her answer carefully. The truth was more complex than most people could understand. After commanding an aircraft carrier, most shore assignments felt anticlimactic. The constant political pressures of senior military positions had worn her down, and the death of her husband in a submarine accident had made the Navy feel more like a source of painful memories than a calling. "After 30 years of military service, I was ready for something different," she said simply. "The ocean has always been my home, and yacht charters allow me to remain on the water while sharing that love with others." It was true, as far as it went, but it didn't capture the full story of how one of the Navy's most decorated female officers had ended up running luxury cruises for wealthy civilians. That story involved bureaucratic battles over women in combat roles, political fights over defense budgets, and personal tragedies that had reshaped her priorities. James Whitmore joined his daughter at the helm, his earlier bluster replaced by genuine curiosity. "Captain, I have to admit that I chose you partly because I thought having a female captain would be an interesting novelty for our guests. I had no idea I was hiring someone of your caliber." Maria smiled at his honesty. "Mr. Whitmore, in my experience, the most dangerous assumption anyone can make is judging people based on their appearance or current circumstances rather than their capabilities and character." The yacht continued its course through the deepening afternoon light, but the relationships among everyone aboard had fundamentally changed. The passengers who had initially treated Maria with polite but distant respect now understood they were traveling with someone whose leadership experience was extraordinary by any measure. Dr. Mueller approached the bridge as evening approached. "Captain, I hope you won't take offense, but I'm curious about the transition from military command to civilian charter operations. It must have required significant adjustments." Maria appreciated his thoughtful question. Unlike Du Bois's earlier interrogation, this felt like genuine interest rather than suspicious probing. The biggest adjustment was learning to serve rather than command. In the military, leadership often involves giving orders and expecting compliance. In charter work, leadership means anticipating needs and providing service while maintaining safety and navigation responsibilities. "But surely your command experience provides advantages," Rebecca Chin observed, having joined the group at the bridge. "Absolutely," Maria agreed. "Crisis management, weather analysis, crew coordination, emergency response, all of these skills transfer directly. The difference is in the day-to-day interactions and objectives." As the sun began to set over the Mediterranean, casting golden light across the water, the passengers found themselves engaging with their captain in ways they never had before. Her revelation during the inspection had torn down the invisible barriers of class and employment status that typically separated charter crews from their wealthy clients. Isabella Santos announced that dinner would be served shortly, and the passengers moved toward the main salon. But before leaving the bridge, James Whitmore turned back to Maria. Captain, I want you to know that this has been an eye-opening day. Not just the incident with the Naval Patrol, but learning about your background and watching how you handled that situation. You've taught us something important about not making assumptions about people. As the passengers went below for dinner, Maria remained at the helm, monitoring their course and reflecting on the day's events. The encounter with Lieutenant Commander Du Bois had forced her to reveal more about herself than she typically shared with charter clients. But perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, and Maria felt the familiar peace that came from being alone on the ocean at day's end. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and destinations, but tonight she would enjoy the satisfaction of a day well navigated both literally and figuratively. The morning sun streamed through the yacht's windows as Maria completed her daily inspection of the vessel systems. They were anchored in a secluded cove near Antibes, having arrived late the previous evening after the encounter with the French patrol boat. The guests had requested a quiet morning before continuing to their final destination in Nice. As she checked the weather reports and navigation charts, Maria reflected on how dramatically the atmosphere aboard had changed. The revelation of her military background had shifted every relationship on the boat, creating both opportunities and complications she hadn't anticipated. James Whitmore emerged from his stateroom earlier than usual, approaching the bridge with 2 cups of coffee. Captain, I thought you might appreciate this. Isabella mentioned you usually skip breakfast. Maria accepted the coffee gratefully, noting the gesture's significance. In her 3 years of charter operations, wealthy clients had never brought her coffee or inquired about her eating habits. The previous day's events had clearly altered Whitmore's perspective on their professional relationship. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. Did you and your family sleep well? Actually, that's what I wanted to discuss, Whitmore said, settling into the chair beside her navigation station. Sarah barely slept. She's been researching your naval career online, and she's completely fascinated. She wants to know everything about aircraft carrier operations, women in the military, and your path to command. Maria smiled slightly. Your daughter seems quite bright. What's her educational background? She's finishing her master's degree in international relations at Georgetown. She's particularly interested in military strategy and defense policy. Whitmore paused, looking slightly embarrassed. I have to confess, we all spent considerable time last night researching your background. I hope you don't mind, but Sarah found several articles about your command of the Enterprise. This development didn't surprise Maria. In the age of internet research, her military career was largely a matter of public record. What concerned her was how this information might change the remaining dynamics of the charter. What did your research reveal? She asked diplomatically. Whitmore's expression grew serious. Enough to make me realize how extraordinary it was for you to handle yesterday's situation with such restraint. The articles described some of the challenges you faced as one of the first women to command an aircraft carrier and the bureaucratic battles you fought for gender equality in naval aviation. Before Maria could respond, Rebecca Chun and Dr. Mueller appeared on deck, both looking eager to join the conversation. Their faces showed the same mixture of curiosity and newfound respect that had characterized interactions since the previous afternoon. Captain Rodriguez, Rebecca began, James told us you might be willing to discuss your naval experience. I work extensively with defense contractors, and I'm fascinated by the operational challenges of aircraft carrier management. Maria found herself in an unusual position. Most charter clients preferred to maintain professional distance from crew members, focusing on their own entertainment and business activities. Now she was being treated more like an honored guest than a hired captain. I'm happy to answer questions during our voyage, Maria said carefully, but I hope you understand that some aspects of my military service involve classified information that I can't discuss. Dr. Mueller nodded understandingly. Of course, Captain, but surely you can share some insights about leadership and crisis management? My pharmaceutical company faces complex international challenges that might benefit from your perspective. As the conversation continued, Sarah Whitmore joined the group, carrying a notebook and looking like an eager graduate student. Captain Rodriguez, I've been reading about the cultural changes in naval aviation during your career. How did you handle resistance from traditionalists who opposed women in combat roles? The question touched on one of the most challenging aspects of Maria's military experience. She had faced discrimination, skepticism, and outright hostility from some colleagues who believed women couldn't handle the pressures of naval aviation and ship command. The battles had been as much political as professional. Leadership often requires changing established cultures, Maria replied thoughtfully. The key is demonstrating competence consistently while maintaining professionalism, even when others behave unprofessionally toward you. Isabella Santos appeared from the galley, carrying a tray of fresh fruit and pastries. As she served the group, she caught Maria's eye and smiled conspiratorially. The chef understood the delicate balance Maria was trying to maintain between accessibility and appropriate boundaries. Captain, Isabella said quietly, "First Mate Kumar requests a word when you have a moment." David Kumar had been monitoring radio communications and noticed something that required Maria's attention. As she excused herself from the passengers, she found him in the communications center looking concerned. "Captain, I've been monitoring naval frequencies, and there's been significant chatter since yesterday's incident," Kumar reported. "It seems word of your encounter with Lieutenant Commander Du Bois has spread through Mediterranean naval circles. This development was both predictable and problematic. Naval communities were notoriously small, and news of interesting encounters traveled quickly through official and unofficial channels. Maria's professional handling of Du Bois had likely been reported up the French chain of command and shared with allied naval units in the region." "What kind of chatter are we seeing?" Maria asked. "Mostly positive, actually. Several French officers have been discussing proper civilian interaction protocols, apparently using yesterday's incident as a training example. But there's also speculation about your current activities and questions about why a former aircraft carrier commander is running charter operations." Maria sighed. This was exactly what she had hoped to avoid by maintaining a low profile in the charter industry. Military communities were intensely curious about the career choices of former senior officers, and her transition to civilian yacht operations would inevitably generate questions and theories. "Any indication of official interest or problems?" Kumar shook his head. "Nothing suggesting difficulties, Captain. If anything, the tone suggests you're being viewed favorably for how you handled the situation. But you should be aware that other naval vessels in the area might approach us with curiosity about your background." As if summoned by their conversation, the yacht's radar detected another vessel approaching from the northeast. Maria returned to the bridge and focused her binoculars on the newcomer, immediately recognizing the distinctive silhouette of an American destroyer. The USS Mitchell was a state-of-the-art Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, one of the most advanced warships in the world. Its presence in Mediterranean waters wasn't unusual, but its direct approach toward their anchored yacht suggested more than casual interest. James Whitmore noticed Maria's attention focused on the approaching warship. "Captain, is that another inspection?" "Possibly," Maria replied, though her naval experience suggested this was something different. American destroyers didn't conduct routine civilian vessel inspections like patrol boats. Their presence typically indicated intelligence gathering, diplomatic missions, or specific operational objectives. The destroyer's communications system crackled to life, broadcasting on the International Maritime Frequency. "Charter Yacht Serenity, this is USS Mitchell. Request permission to communicate with Captain Rodriguez on naval frequency." The passengers exchanged glances, recognizing that this was unlike the previous day's encounter with the French patrol boat. The American destroyer was specifically requesting communication with Maria by name, indicating prior knowledge of her presence and identity. Maria moved to the yacht's military radio system, a sophisticated communications array she had insisted on installing when she began charter operations. Her naval background made her uncomfortable relying solely on civilian maritime radios in emergency situations. USS Mitchell, This is Captain Rodriguez aboard Serenity. Switching to TAC 1. The secure tactical frequency allowed private communication between the vessels, and Maria immediately recognized the voice of the destroyer's commanding officer. Commander Patricia Walsh had served under Maria's command during a Mediterranean deployment 3 years earlier. Captain Rodriguez, this is Commander Walsh. It's an honor to speak with you again, ma'am. The formal courtesy surprised Maria. Naval protocol typically didn't require active duty personnel to address retired officers with such deference, but Walsh's tone suggested genuine respect rather than mere politeness. Good morning, Commander. What brings the Mitchell to these waters? Ma'am, we're conducting routine operations in the Mediterranean, but I have to admit that reports of yesterday's incident with the French patrol boat have generated considerable interest among the crew. Many of my officers served under your command at various times, and they'd be honored to pay their respects if circumstances permit. Maria found herself facing an unexpected dilemma. The destroyer's interest was flattering and professionally satisfying, but it threatened to completely transform what was supposed to be a low-key charter operation into something resembling a military reunion. The passengers were watching intently, clearly understanding that something significant was developing. Sarah Whitmore looked particularly excited, recognizing this as an extraordinary opportunity to observe military protocol and ceremony firsthand. Commander Walsh, while I appreciate the sentiment, I'm currently engaged in civilian charter operations. My passengers have scheduled activities that I don't want to disrupt, but James Whitmore had overheard enough of the conversation to understand the situation. He approached Maria with an expression of genuine enthusiasm. Captain Rodriguez, if there's an opportunity for my family and associates to observe naval operations or meet with your former colleagues, we would be absolutely fascinated. This could be the highlight of our entire Mediterranean vacation. Dr. Amula nodded eagerly. Captain, this would be an extraordinary educational opportunity. We're witnessing living history. Maria realized that her attempt to maintain separation between her military past and civilian present was becoming impossible. The confluence of yesterday's encounter with Du Bois and today's contact with the USS Mitchell had created a situation where both worlds were colliding in ways she couldn't control. Commander Walsh, Maria said into the radio, my passengers have expressed interest in observing any appropriate interactions. What did you have in mind? Ma'am, with your permission, we'd like to conduct a brief ceremonial pass in your honor. Nothing elaborate, but several of my officers specifically requested the opportunity to render proper respects to their former commanding officer. The request touched Maria deeply. Naval ceremony and tradition created bonds that lasted long after active service ended, and the loyalty of former subordinates was one of the most meaningful aspects of military leadership. Very well, Commander. Serenity will remain at anchor. Please proceed with your ceremony. As the USS Mitchell began maneuvering for its ceremonial pass, Maria found herself surrounded by charter passengers who were about to witness something few civilians ever experienced. The destroyer's crew would be demonstrating the highest traditions of naval professionalism and respect. Isabella Santos emerged from the galley carrying champagne glasses, having instinctively understood that they were about to witness something special. David Kumar activated the yacht's American flag and prepared to render appropriate honors as the destroyer approached. Sarah Whitmore stood beside Maria at the bridge rail, her notebook forgotten as she prepared to observe authentic naval ceremony. Captain, this is incredible. How often do destroyers conduct ceremonial passes for retired officers? It's quite rare, Maria admitted. Commander Walsh is going above and beyond normal protocols. The USS Mitchell began its approach, and Maria could see the crew members lining the destroyer's rails in dress uniforms. This was a full honors ceremony, typically reserved for visiting dignitaries or special occasions. The respect being shown was extraordinary and deeply meaningful. As the destroyer drew closer, its crew's attention to detail became apparent. Every sailor was perfectly positioned, their uniforms immaculate, their bearing displaying the pride and professionalism that characterized elite naval units. The ceremony was about to begin, and Maria found herself caught between her past and present, surrounded by civilian passengers who were gaining unprecedented insight into the military traditions that had shaped her life and career. The USS Mitchell approached with a precision that only comes from years of intensive training and absolute professionalism. Maria watched through her binoculars as Commander Walsh positioned her destroyer for the ceremonial pass, noting the exceptional seamanship displayed in the vessel's movements. David Kumar stood at attention beside the yacht's flagstaff, his Royal Navy background helping him appreciate the significance of what they were witnessing. Isabella Santos had gathered the charter guests on the main deck, positioning them for optimal viewing while ensuring their safety during the proceedings. "Captain Rodriguez," Sarah Whitmore said quietly, "I've read about naval ceremonies, but I never imagined I'd witness one in person. This is extraordinary." As the destroyer drew within 200 yards, its crew became clearly visible along the rails. Maria could see at least 50 sailors in dress blue uniforms, standing at perfect attention with military bearing that spoke to their training and discipline. On the bridge wing, Commander Walsh was visible in her crisp white uniform, preparing to render honors. The Mitchell's loudspeaker system activated, and Commander Walsh's voice carried clearly across the water. "Charter Yacht Serenity, USS Mitchell renders honors to Captain Maria Elena Rodriguez, United States Navy, retired, distinguished commanding officer and leader." At that moment, the destroyer's crew came to present arms in perfect unison, a display of synchronized precision that took years of training to achieve. The ship's whistle sounded 3 long blasts, the traditional naval salute reserved for senior officers and special occasions. Maria stepped to the yacht's rail and rendered a crisp salute in return, her military bearing returning automatically despite 3 years of civilian life. The moment connected her to decades of naval tradition and the brotherhood of the sea that transcended individual careers and assignments. The USS Mitchell maintained its slow, steady course past the yacht, allowing the ceremony to continue for several minutes. As it drew abreast of their position, Maria could see individual faces among the crew, recognizing several officers who had served under her command during various deployments. Commander Walsh's voice came over the radio again. "Captain Rodriguez, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Morrison sent her respects. She credits her current assignment as the Mitchell's executive officer to leadership principles you taught her during your command of the Enterprise." This personal message brought unexpected emotion to Maria's throat. Sarah Morrison had been a young pilot when she served in the Enterprise's air wing, struggling with confidence issues and uncertainty about her naval career. Maria had spent considerable time mentoring her, helping her develop the leadership skills that had obviously served her well. Dr. Mueller approached Maria quietly, his understanding of military protocol allowing him to appreciate the full significance of what they were experiencing. "Captain, this is remarkable. The respect they're showing you, it's quite moving." Rebecca Chan was recording the ceremony on her phone, recognizing this as a unique moment that few civilians ever witnessed. Her work with defense contractors had given her some exposure to military culture, but she had never seen such a spontaneous display of honor and respect. As the destroyer completed its pass, Commander Walsh's voice returned to the radio. "Captain Rodriguez, with your permission, I have a request from my crew. Several officers who served under your command would like to pay their respects in person, if circumstances permit." Maria glanced at her charter passengers, seeing expressions of excitement and encouragement. James Whitmore nodded enthusiastically, clearly understanding that this opportunity was far more valuable than any scheduled sightseeing activities. "Commander Walsh, Serenity welcomes a brief visit from your representatives." The destroyer began maneuvering to launch a small boat while maintaining safe distance from the anchored yacht. Maria could see the crew preparing a rigid inflatable boat with what appeared to be 4 or 5 personnel in dress uniforms. "Captain Rodriguez," Isabella Santos said quietly, "I've prepared some refreshments if you'd like to receive your visitors properly." The chef's thoughtfulness touched Maria. Isabella understood that this impromptu reunion deserved appropriate hospitality, and her preparation of suitable refreshments demonstrated the attention to detail that made her invaluable to charter operations. Within 20 minutes, the destroyer's boat approached the yacht's stern, carrying 5 officers in pristine dress blue uniforms. Maria recognized Lieutenant Commander Morrison immediately, noting how the uncertain young pilot had developed into a confident executive officer with command presence. Also aboard were Lieutenant James Parker, who had been a junior officer in the Enterprise's operations department, and Commander Michael Torres, who had served as the carrier's air wing commander during Maria's final deployment. The sight of these accomplished officers coming to pay their respects was deeply gratifying. As the Navy personnel came aboard, David Kumar and Isabella Santos stood at attention, their own military backgrounds making them appreciate the significance of the visit. The charter passengers watched with fascination as naval protocol unfolded before them. Lieutenant Commander Morrison approached Maria first, rendering a crisp salute. "Captain Rodriguez, permission to come aboard, ma'am." "Permission granted, XO. It's wonderful to see you again." The use of Morrison's current title rather than her name demonstrated Maria's awareness of her former subordinate's career progress and current responsibilities. This attention to protocol and personal development had been one of Maria's strengths as a commanding officer. Commander Torres stepped forward next, his weathered face showing the experience of a career naval aviator. "Captain, on behalf of Carrier Air Wing's 7 veterans, I want to express our gratitude for your leadership during some of the most challenging operations of our careers." The reference to challenging operations intrigued the charter passengers, who were gaining insight into Maria's military service that went far beyond administrative command responsibilities. Their research the previous evening had revealed that Maria's tenure commanding the Enterprise included several crisis deployments to volatile regions. Sarah Whitmore approached the group with her notebook, looking like an eager student. "Commander Torres, could you share some insights about aircraft carrier operations? I'm studying international relations, and I'm fascinated by naval power projection." Torres glanced at Maria, who nodded permission for him to engage with the civilians. "Miss, carrier operations involve coordinating hundreds of personnel, dozens of aircraft, and multiple mission objectives simultaneously. Captain Rodriguez was exceptional at managing these complex operations while maintaining crew morale and mission effectiveness." Lieutenant Parker added, "Ma'am, your emphasis on cross-training and emergency preparedness saved lives during our Persian Gulf deployment. The lessons you taught about crisis leadership have influenced how I handle challenges in my current position." James Whitmore found himself deeply impressed by the obvious respect and affection these accomplished officers showed toward Maria. As someone who had built a successful technology company, he understood leadership and organizational culture, but the bonds displayed here seemed stronger than typical professional relationships. "Captain Rodriguez," Whitmore said, "I'm beginning to understand why yesterday's encounter with that French patrol boat unfolded as it did. These officers are describing someone with extraordinary leadership capabilities." Dr. Mueller approached Commander Torres with scientific curiosity. "Commander, I work in pharmaceuticals, and I'm interested in the stress management aspects of carrier operations. How do personnel handle the pressure of continuous high-stakes decision-making?" "Doctor, that's an excellent question," Torres replied. "Captain Rodriguez implemented wellness programs and stress reduction protocols that became models for other commands. She understood that taking care of personnel was essential for mission success." The conversation continued for over an hour, with the visiting officers sharing stories and insights that painted a picture of Maria's naval career that was far more complex and impressive than her modest descriptions had suggested. The charter passengers were learning about leadership, crisis management, and organizational excellence from people who had experienced it firsthand. As the visit concluded, Lieutenant Commander Morrison approached Maria privately. "Captain, I hope you don't mind my asking, but many of us have wondered about your transition to civilian charter operations. It seems like such a dramatic change from carrier command." Maria appreciated Morrison's directness. The question had undoubtedly been discussed among her former subordinates, and deserved an honest response. XO, after 30 years of military service, I wanted something that would keep me on the ocean while allowing me to share that love with others. Charter operations provide challenge and satisfaction without the political pressures and bureaucratic battles that characterized my final years in uniform. Morrison nodded understandingly. Ma'am, many of us face similar decisions about career transitions. Your example of finding meaningful work that aligns with your values is inspiring. As the naval officers prepared to depart, Commander Torres turned to address the charter passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, you're traveling with someone truly exceptional. Captain Rodriguez represents the best traditions of naval leadership, and you're fortunate to experience her professionalism firsthand. The officers departed with the same ceremonial precision they had displayed throughout the visit, leaving the charter passengers with new understanding and appreciation for their captain's background and capabilities. As the USS Mitchell's boat returned to the destroyer, James Whitmore approached Maria at the bridge. Captain, I need to apologize for how my family and I initially treated you. We viewed you as highly qualified hired help, when we should have recognized we were in the presence of someone extraordinary. Maria smiled warmly. Mr. Whitmore, you treated me with appropriate courtesy and respect for a charter captain. My military background doesn't change my current responsibilities or our professional relationship. But privately, Maria knew that everything had changed. The revelation of her naval career and the ceremonial recognition from the USS Mitchell had permanently altered the dynamics aboard the yacht. The passengers now viewed her not just as a skilled captain, but as a historical figure whose leadership experience provided unique insights and perspectives. Sarah Whitmore joined her father at the bridge, her notebook filled with observations and quotations from the visiting officers. Captain Rodriguez, this has been the most educational experience of my academic career. Would you be willing to discuss leadership principles during the remainder of our voyage? As afternoon settled over the Mediterranean, Maria realized that her attempt to maintain separation between her military past and civilian present had ended. The events of the past 2 days had created a new reality where both aspects of her life were integrated in ways that felt natural and satisfying. The yacht prepared to continue its journey toward Nice, but the relationships among everyone aboard had been transformed by the morning's extraordinary encounter with representatives of Maria's distinguished military heritage. The final evening of the charter found a yacht anchored off the coast of Nice, the French Riviera's lights twinkling like stars along the shoreline. Maria stood at the bridge, completing her final navigation checks before they would return to Monaco the following morning to conclude what had become an extraordinary voyage. The transformation that had begun with Lieutenant Commander Du Bois's inspection and accelerated through the USS Mitchell's ceremonial visit had fundamentally changed everyone aboard. What started as a standard luxury charter had evolved into something far more meaningful for both the passengers and crew. James Whitmore approached the bridge carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing an expression of thoughtful gratitude. Captain Rodriguez, my family, and associates would like to propose a toast before our voyage concludes. Maria joined the group on the main deck, where Isabella Santos had prepared an elegant final dinner under the Mediterranean stars. The chef had outdone herself, creating a meal that honored both the luxury expectations of charter service and the ceremonial significance of the day's events. Captain, Sarah Whitmore began, standing with her wine glass raised. 3 days ago, we thought we were chartering a yacht with a highly qualified captain. We had no idea we were placing ourselves in the care of someone whose leadership experience represents the pinnacle of naval achievement. Dr. Mueller nodded in agreement. The past few days have provided lessons in leadership, professionalism, and grace under pressure that no business school could teach. Watching you handle both the French patrol boat incident and today's reunion with your former colleagues has been genuinely inspiring. Rebecca Chin stepped forward with her own observations. Captain Rodriguez, my work with defense contractors has exposed me to many military leaders, but I've rarely seen the level of respect and affection that your former officers displayed today. That speaks to something beyond professional competence. It demonstrates exceptional character. Maria felt deeply moved by their words, but also somewhat uncomfortable with the praise. Throughout her military career, she had focused on mission accomplishment and taking care of personnel rather than seeking recognition or accolades. "Thank you all for your kind words," Maria replied. "But I hope you understand that everything you observed, the professionalism, the leadership principles, the commitment to service, these are qualities that exist throughout the military. I was privileged to serve alongside exceptional people who taught me as much as I ever taught them." David Kumar and Isabella Santos joined the group, having completed their evening duties. Their presence emphasized the team nature of successful yacht operations and the respect that existed among all crew members regardless of background or rank. "Captain," Isabella said, speaking for the crew, "this has been the most memorable charter of our careers. Not just because of the naval ceremonies, but because we've watched you demonstrate what true leadership looks like in challenging situations." James Whitmore raised his glass higher. "To Captain Maria Rodriguez, a leader who has served her country with distinction and continues to serve others with the same dedication and professionalism. We are honored to have traveled with you." As they toasted and began their final dinner, the conversation naturally turned to the broader implications of what they had experienced. Sarah Whitmore had filled her notebook with insights about naval operations, military leadership, and crisis management that would influence her graduate studies and future career. "Captain Rodriguez," Sarah said, "I've been thinking about your transition from military command to civilian service. Have you considered sharing your experiences through teaching or writing? Your perspectives on leadership could benefit many people." The suggestion wasn't new to Maria. Several former colleagues had encouraged her to write about her experiences as one of the first women to command an aircraft carrier, particularly the challenges she had faced and the lessons she had learned about leading in male-dominated environments. "I've considered it," Maria admitted, "but I've always been more focused on doing the job than talking about doing the job. Leadership principles are best demonstrated through action rather than discussion." Dr. Mueller leaned forward with interest. "But surely there's value in documenting those experiences for future generations? The challenges you faced as a pioneer in naval aviation could provide guidance for women entering other traditionally male-dominated fields." Rebecca Chun nodded enthusiastically. "The defense industry still struggles with gender equality issues. Your example of achieving the highest levels of command while maintaining integrity and earning genuine respect could inspire significant change." As the evening progressed, Maria found herself sharing stories and insights that she had rarely discussed, even with close friends. The unique circumstances of the voyage had created an environment where her military experiences felt relevant and valuable to civilian audiences. "One of the most important lessons I learned," Maria reflected, "was that true leadership isn't about commanding respect. It's about earning it through consistent competence, integrity, and genuine concern for the people you're responsible for." Sarah Whitmore was taking notes rapidly, recognizing these insights as potentially valuable for her academic research. "How did you handle resistance from people who didn't believe women belonged in combat roles?" "By focusing on performance rather than politics," Maria replied. "I couldn't control other people's prejudices, but I could control my own preparation, professionalism, and results. Eventually, competence speaks louder than bias." The conversation continued late into the evening, covering topics from crisis management and decision-making under pressure to the importance of mentorship and team building. The charter passengers were gaining insights that would influence their own professional development and leadership approaches. As midnight approached, the group began to disperse, but James Whitmore lingered on deck with Maria, looking out at the lights of the French Riviera. "Captain, I want you to know that this voyage has changed my perspective on many things," Whitmore said thoughtfully. "Success in business taught me to judge people by their achievements and credentials, but I rarely looked deeper to understand the character and experience that created those achievements. Maria appreciated his honesty. Mr. Whitmore, one of the benefits of charter work is meeting people from different backgrounds and learning about their perspectives. This voyage has been educational for me as well. I hope you'll consider my daughter's suggestion about sharing your experiences more widely, Whitmore continued. The world needs examples of principled leadership, especially from people who've faced significant challenges and overcome them. As they prepared for their final night aboard the yacht, Maria reflected on how dramatically the voyage had evolved. Her carefully maintained separation between military past and civilian present had dissolved, but perhaps that integration was healthy and necessary. The following morning brought clear skies and calm seas for their return to Monaco. As they approached the harbor where the charter had begun 4 days earlier, the passengers prepared to disembark, but the relationships forged during the voyage would clearly continue. Sarah Whitmore approached Maria with her business card and a formal request. Captain Rodriguez, I'm hoping to interview you for my graduate thesis about women in military leadership. Would you be willing to participate? Dr. Mueller and Rebecca Chun made similar requests for future collaboration, recognizing that Maria's insights could benefit their respective industries. James Whitmore surprised everyone by offering to sponsor a scholarship program for young women pursuing naval careers, inspired by what he had learned about Maria's pioneering role in military aviation. As the yacht docked and the passengers prepared to depart, Isabella Santos presented Maria with a photograph album she had secretly compiled during the voyage. The images captured not just the luxury and beauty of their Mediterranean journey, but the moments of genuine connection and mutual respect that had developed among the group. Captain, Isabella said, I wanted you to have something to remember this charter. But more than that, I hope you'll remember how much your example has meant to all of us. David Kumar added his own observations as they completed the post-voyage procedures. Captain, in my years of charter work, I've never seen passengers connect with crew the way this group connected with you. Your authenticity and professionalism created something special. As the passengers departed, each expressing genuine gratitude and promising to stay in contact, Maria realized that this voyage had marked a turning point in her post-military life. The enforced revelation of her naval background had created opportunities for meaningful engagement that she hadn't expected or sought. James Whitmore was the last to leave, shaking Maria's hand firmly as he prepared to disembark. Captain Rodriguez, this has been an extraordinary experience. You've reminded me that true success isn't just about achieving goals. It's about how you achieve them and what you contribute to others along the way. As the yacht settled into the quiet routine of post-charter maintenance, Maria stood on the bridge looking out at Monaco Harbor. The encounter with Lieutenant Commander Du Bois seemed like weeks rather than days ago, and the ceremonial visit from the USS Mitchell had created memories that would last a lifetime. Isabella Santos joined her at the bridge, both women reflecting on what they had experienced. Captain, are you glad this happened? The way your military background came out, I mean. Maria considered the question carefully. I spent 3 years trying to keep my naval career separate from charter operations, thinking it wasn't relevant to what I'm doing now. But this voyage taught me that all of our experiences shape who we are and how we serve others. Trying to compartmentalize my life was probably a mistake. The phone in the yacht's office began ringing, and David Kumar answered to find charter booking inquiries that specifically requested the former aircraft carrier captain. Word of Maria's background and the extraordinary voyage had already begun spreading through yacht charter networks. Captain, Kumar called, I think our future bookings are going to be quite different from what we've experienced before. Maria smiled, understanding that her quiet life as an anonymous yacht captain had ended permanently. The events of the past few days had created a new chapter in her career, one that integrated her military experience with civilian service in ways that felt authentic and meaningful. As evening approached and the yacht prepared for its next charter, Maria reflected on the lessons of the extraordinary voyage. Lieutenant Commander Du Bois had learned about the importance of treating civilians with respect and professionalism. The passengers had gained insights into leadership, character, and the value of looking beyond surface appearances. The visiting officers from the USS Mitchell had demonstrated the lasting bonds created by exceptional leadership and shared service. For Maria herself, the voyage had provided something unexpected. The realization that her military experience wasn't a burden to be hidden, but a resource to be shared appropriately with others who could benefit from its lessons. The Mediterranean sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors as Maria completed her evening inspection of the yacht, preparing for whatever adventures the next charter might bring. She had learned that sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin when your carefully planned course is disrupted by unexpected encounters that force you to navigate in new directions. The luxury yacht that had been halted by a naval vessel had indeed continued its voyage, but everyone aboard had been permanently changed by the revelation of their captain's extraordinary background and the authentic leadership she demonstrated when circumstances demanded it.